Humph, there's no way I can accept someone like you as a part of our family. I absolutely refuse to acknowledge it.
We were visiting a restaurant during our trip when my mother-in-law, Ellen, suddenly said this to me.
Today I had planned to spend a special time just with family, so I never considered having a seat for you from the start. To think that you seriously believe you are a part of this family, it's utterly ridiculous. A useless person like you, daring to claim to be a part of our family, is unacceptable. You're a disgrace to our family. You couldn't even qualify to be a housemaid.
I was the one who had planned this trip, and all Ellen did was state her demands. Despite that, why am I being treated as less than a housemaid? I understand. I hereby decline to participate in this trip. Saying this, I stood up from my chair and left the scene. It was a trip I had been looking forward to, but I never imagined things would turn out this way. However, the one who would end up crying later on was Ellen, who had intended to enjoy a fun trip. That's because she was about to face unimaginable difficulties in a foreign land. My name is Natalie Handy. I'm a working housewife, and I've been in a long-term relationship with my husband, Daniel, since our university days. We got married after graduating and are now in our 5th year of marriage. Counting from our university days, we've been together for roughly 9 years. Our relationship has deepened, and I've come to see not just his good sides but his unpleasant sides as well. Although our marriage no longer has the passion it once did, I wouldn't go so far as to call it a period of complete stagnation. At the beginning of our relationship, Daniel was considerate towards women and seemed to act with a lady's first attitude. However, now he has a noticeable chauvinistic side, perceiving housework as a woman's role. His typical weekday routine involves coming home from work, eating the meal prepared for him, taking a bath, and then going to sleep. Even on weekends, he spends his time unproductively, engrossed in games on his smartphone from morning till late at night. Since I also work full-time, there are moments when I wish he would help out with the housework a bit. We used to argue about this a lot in the early years of our marriage. However, now, arguments about this have become rare. In fact, when I do get him to help with housework, and I've almost resigned myself to it, it often ends up being less efficient. After all, I think many marital relationships are in this state. Although there is a movement towards gender equality in society as a whole, it will likely take many decades before this fully permeates into households. Furthermore, it might be a trivial issue that Daniel is always lazing around. There's a more serious problem existing. That problem is my relationship with Ellen. Although we live separately, she often contacts me and visits our house. If she were concerned about my health or happiness, I would appreciate it. However, the reality is that she has never shown such concern. Her sole purpose of visiting my house is to have me solve some troubles she is facing on her behalf. The tasks I have undertaken for her vary widely, such as preparing official documents for her, planning trips that only my in-laws take, and occasionally, participating in the major cleaning sessions at my in-laws' house. In these cleaning tasks, I end up doing almost everything by myself, handling the air conditioner, bathroom, kitchen, etc. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that I am essentially in charge of everything rather than just helping out. Additionally, there have been times when I've lent my name for contracts related to mobile phones, internet, credit cards, and even times when I am called upon like a taxi service. I was also expected to assist in caring for my late great-mother-in-law. While I wasn't bothered by Ellen during work hours, it was typical for her to unabashedly ask various favors of me during my private time. Daniel says that she grew up in a wealthy family. The family business was thriving since her childhood. They lived in a large house and had maids to take care of daily chores. However, as time passed and the family business situation changed, she started living a life similar to other ordinary citizens. But, the habit of dependency she developed from childhood continues to this day. I wish that Daniel would express his opinions more clearly to his mother, but unfortunately, I do not see any signs of such attitude from him. Perhaps, under the pretext of saving Daniel's face, my tolerance towards Ellen has led to the current situation. However, I am not a housemaid. If she could say a word of thanks, I would be satisfied with just that, but such words were only heard in the beginning. Now, Ellen completely takes me for granted, even complaining about my efforts in certain situations. For example, even if she complains to me that the weather ruined everything on a trip, that is something beyond my control. On top of that, things are financially tight, and she hardly ever takes the initiative to pay for her cell phone and credit card bills unless I remind her. We are not living together, so both of us are busy with our daily work and family matters. In such a situation, it's easy to forget to remind her about the payments. As a result, I have no idea how much money I've ended up paying on behalf of Ellen. And this makes me think, isn't there a way to refuse any more requests for help without upsetting her?
Natalie, dear, I want our family to go on an overseas trip. Could you arrange that for us, please?
As soon as she got on the phone, Ellen didn't hesitate to start talking about a family trip. According to her, the destination is France and the trip will last a week. She mentioned that the trip would include a total of 5 family members, strangely enough, including Daniel and me. Concerning the plane tickets, she emphasized that they must be in business class, and reservations at a specific restaurant she's eager to visit are absolutely essential. Apart from these points, she completely left all the other details up to my preference and judgment. I can't help but wonder how many other situations could be as self-centered and convenient as this one. The first thing that we need to consider is whether it is practically possible for Daniel and me to take a whole week off. Even if we manage to get the time off, there is no guarantee that our holidays will align. Ellen, don't you think this plan is a bit too rushed? Both Daniel and I need to check with our companies first to see if we can even take the time off. When I raised my concerns, Ellen's response was completely unexpected.
Why does your job matter for a family trip? Daniel has already gotten permission. It's common sense to prioritize family over work. I feel a bit sorry for you having such values.
After saying this, she suddenly hung up the phone. What is she trying to impose on me? This is undoubtedly the biggest trouble I have ever experienced. If I choose not to proceed with the trip this time, what kind of treatment will I receive from Ellen in the future? Regardless of how much I complain, I have no choice but to proceed with arranging the trip. However, I must admit that in this particular case, not all aspects are unpleasant. In my heart, I was honestly a bit excited about the trip to France. After all, this was my first overseas trip in my life, and it was impossible not to be thrilled. While keeping these feelings to myself, I decided to apply for a vacation at work. At first, my boss had a slightly reluctant expression, but fortunately, it was a relatively calm period at work, so I was somehow able to take the vacation. I was able to smoothly proceed with researching the tourist spots needed for the trip, and I successfully completed bookings for the flights, hotels, and the restaurant that Ellen particularly wanted to visit. I thought that at least this would prevent any complaints from Ellen. And finally, the day of the trip arrived. We met at the airport, and the 5 of us gathered: Daniel, Ellen, my father-in-law named Arthur, my aunt-in-law named Vicky, and me. About Vicky, I had met her briefly in the past, but it was only for a short time, so our relationship was almost like a first meeting. Nevertheless, upon Ellen's instructions, I was made to carry the luggage of Ellen and Vicky, struggling to walk together with everyone. Honestly, it was extremely tough to carry a week's worth of luggage for 3 people along with my own. My hands were full with luggage, and I was in a state where I couldn't even wipe the sweat flowing down my forehead due to the heavy labor. In the midst of this, I finally couldn't bear it any longer and decided to ask Daniel for help. Hey, could you help me out a bit? If you could carry one of the bags for Ellen or Vicky, that would really help. Although Daniel initially had a slightly reluctant expression, he eventually reached out his hand to me. The moment I tried to pass the luggage to him, I heard Ellen's voice from the front.
Daniel, you don't need to do that. Today is a special travel day for our entire family. There is absolutely no need for unnecessary hardship. Rather, why don't you let Natalie take care of your luggage as well?
Her way of speaking made it seem like I was not accepted as part of the family. When I looked at Arthur and Vicky, they casually averted their gaze. It seemed like they had sympathy for my situation, but their desire not to anger Ellen was stronger. And as for Daniel, he said something utterly unbelievable.
Oh really? You'll carry my luggage as well.
At that moment, I lost my temper and raised my voice unintentionally. Can't you see that I'm clearly not in a state to easily carry any more luggage? Because I raised my voice, other airport users around us started to stare. Among them, only Ellen was laughing, as if nothing had happened.
Well, what a rude way to speak.
Upon hearing those words, I felt ashamed and could only express my apology. Finally, the boarding process was over, and the moment to be freed from the heavy luggage arrived. On board, I had secured business class seats as Ellen had wished. The seats were arranged in a single row by the windows and 2 rows in the center, providing a relatively spacious area. Suddenly, the cost of the trip came to my mind. I had been carefree until now, but being inside the airplane, the worries started to cross my mind. However, since we were already on the plane, there was nothing more I could do about it. So, I decided to stop thinking and abandon my thoughts for a while. In the airplane seats, Ellen and Vicky sat together, Daniel and Arthur sat together, and I was seated alone. A stranger would be sitting next to me. Since we were an odd number, it couldn't be helped, but I felt a bit lonely being the only one sitting alone. On board, Ellen didn't particularly ask me for anything, and that was somewhat relaxing. However, Daniel fell asleep as soon as we got on the plane, showing no signs of concern about me. Therefore, for about 7 hours until we arrived in France, I spent my time without talking to anyone, feeling lonely. But as soon as we safely arrived in France and got off the plane, I could feel the completely different atmosphere from America, and it refreshed my mood. The lonely time on the plane was completely forgotten. However, my uplifted mood was short-lived as I had to carry the heavy luggage of Ellen and Vicky again after collecting our bags at the airport. I told myself that it couldn't be helped and that it was best to avoid any conflicts in a foreign country by enduring it. Despite my feelings of resignation, we were able to arrive at the restaurant Ellen had been eagerly looking forward to. Then, a question suddenly crossed my mind. Why didn't we put our luggage in the hotel first and then head to the restaurant? Upon careful thought, it would have been much easier both physically and mentally. Nevertheless, while rethinking and convincing myself that having time to rest after dropping off the luggage would be better, I headed to the restaurant. As we entered, I noticed Ellen finding someone and waving her hand energetically towards them. Looking there, a man of about the same age as Ellen was waving back at us. Who in the world is he? Is he a local? The table that the man is sitting at was supposed to be reserved by me. I was a bit confused by the fact that an unfamiliar person was sitting there, but oblivious to what I was thinking, Ellen confidently walked over to the man.
It's really been a while, Samuel, my big brother. It's good to see you're doing well.
Judging by her calling him Big Brother, could he be my uncle-in-law? Even though I was thinking this, I knew I had to greet him. Nice to meet you, I'm Daniel's wife, Natalie. Pleased to meet you. As I greeted him, Samuel had a momentary look of surprise, but he quickly recovered with a smile and warmly welcomed me.
Nice to meet you, Natalie.
He continued talking.
I usually live in France here, so this is our first time meeting. It might let you feel be a bit awkward since we're meeting for the first time, but we're already family, so I hope you don't feel like you have to hold back.
Unlike Ellen, Samuel seemed like a very warm-hearted person to me. However, I realized there was a problem. The numbers doesn't match with the reservation I had taken. Ellen, if Samuel is joining us here, I wish you had told me sooner. But I have no idea what will happen when we go to other places later according to our schedule. Ellen looked confused for a moment after hearing what I said.
Why do we need to change the number of people?
She looked at me with genuine curiosity and asked. Maybe her forgetfulness had gotten worse. Well, you, Arthur, Vicky, Samuel, Daniel, and me, that makes 6 of us, right? But we made the reservation for 5 people, didn't we? Before I could finish speaking, Ellen exclaimed.
Aha.
And seemed to finally understand.
Well, yes, but really, there's no need to change the number of people at all. The number of seats is just right. I told you we are on a family trip today, didn't I? So there's no way a seat was prepared for you in the first place. You didn't really think you were a part of our family, did you? That's really cheeky of you. For a lousy daughter-in-law like you to audaciously claim to be a part of our family is a disgrace to our clan. You are just a guide, and nothing more.
I've taken care of every single task that Ellen asked me to, and especially for today, I've arranged everything myself. Nevertheless, Ellen called me a guide, and on top of that, Daniel shows no sign of objecting to her. Hey, Daniel. Why are you always following your mother's orders? We are a married couple, aren't we? Why do we have to be told that we're not a family? When I appealed to him, he responded with a very disgusted expression on his face, as if he is saying don't get involved with me.
Well, you and I are certainly family, but whether you and Mom are family, I'm a bit doubtful. Besides, regarding this trip, I heard beforehand that you were supposed to carry the luggage, Natalie. So I thought you came here in agreement.
I was never told such a thing. I exploded in anger at his words. A moment after being surprised by my anger, Daniel says quietly.
I don't know about that.
Just like the incident at the airport, the other customers around us were paying attention to us. But I was so full of sadness and anger from being looked down upon up until now that I didn't even have time to feel embarrassed. As I desperately held back my tears, Ellen spoke again.
Now look at the reality firmly and act with awareness. You have duties to fulfill. Hurry and hail a taxi nearby and quickly transport all of our luggage to the hotel. After that, time your return to pick us up when we are about done with our leisurely meal. In the meantime, you are free to spend your own time.
As usual, she ordered me around as if her instructions were absolute and beyond doubt. My patience had finally reached its limit. I glared strongly at Ellen, who treated me like a mere servant, and at Daniel, Arthur, and Vicky, who did not voice any objections and lacked a clear sense of self. Then, I will excuse myself from here. Your affairs are no longer my concern. If you have the knowledgeable Samuel from France, I'm sure you can manage without me. Having said that, I made up my mind to leave the restaurant confidently. The moment I was about to leave, Ellen loudly called out to stop me.
Hey, wait a minute. What are you going to do about our luggage? You should at least take responsibility to carry the luggage to the hotel. What do you think we brought you along for, you useless thing?
Ignoring her words, I immediately hailed a taxi that was parked nearby and headed for the airport. Inside the taxi, I took out my cell phone and booked a plane ticket. While waiting for the plane at the airport, I suddenly realized something. Before I knew it, even Daniel had not been treating me as a proper member of the family. This realization stabbed me in the chest, and sadness and frustration overflowed. I couldn't stop crying. I wonder what the other customers around me thought when they saw me crying. Perhaps they avoided me or felt uncomfortable. However, at that point, my heart was so torn that I didn't even care about the gazes of the people around me. Amidst all this, my cell phone rang. Right now, I'm not in the mood to talk to anyone. But the phone kept ringing again and again. Reluctantly, I decided to answer the phone. It was Daniel. For a moment, I thought it might be an apology call from him, but it was not.
Natalie, can you come back right now? Uncle Samuel got mad at Mom and left, and we were kicked out of the store by the staff. I don't know what to do now. Families should help each other in times of trouble, right? So please, I'm begging you.
Listening to his words, I realized that Samuel was indeed a decent person, just as I had thought. From what I heard, Samuel couldn't stand the way Ellen and Daniel were treating me.
If I'm going to feel this uncomfortable, I don't want to travel with you guys.
After saying that, he decided to go home right away and left the place. Upon hearing more about it, it seemed that my in-laws had made quite a scene at the restaurant, raising their voices loudly at the staff, which resulted in us being kicked out. They were completely at a loss about what to do next. They had managed to get from the airport to the restaurant because I had been asking for directions in French, communicating with the locals along the way. Although this was my first private trip abroad, I had frequently gone on business trips overseas for work, so I had acquired a basic level of French proficiency. So, you only treat me as a family member when it suits you, is that it? The sadness and tears felt like a lie. I was rapidly feeling a sense of detachment growing inside me. This must be divine punishment. Still, I decided to tell Daniel the location of the hotel. However, I chose to explain it to him in a malicious way, in French. The hotel is about a 20-minute taxi ride from the store we were at earlier. It's called Hotel Paris Le Grand.
What are you saying? I don't understand at all. Speak clearly, please.
I'm explaining it to you kindly enough. It's your fault for coming here without preparing anything, even though you knew we were coming to France from the start. Besides, you made yourselves clear, you're not a part of our family. So, I don't consider you my family either. Whatever happens to you, it has absolutely nothing to do with me.
Don't joke like that.
He was screaming in a half-crazed state over the phone. He had lost control of his emotions, and his voice was trembling with anger. Suddenly, the person speaking on the other end of the phone changed to Ellen.
Natalie, Daniel is begging you so earnestly. Why won't you tell him? As his wife, it's natural to devote yourself to your husband. Come back right now and fulfill your duties. Your attitude is like that of a worthless servant.
At that moment, I felt that talking to her was a waste of time. I was convinced that communication between us was impossible, as was clear from our previous interactions. Furthermore, the time for my return flight was rapidly approaching, and I could not afford to waste any more time talking to her. Don't involve me anymore. I said those words in French and hung up the phone. At the same time, I started the procedures to block my cell phone and credit card, which I had handed over to Ellen. Somehow, my in-laws managed to wander through the foreign country with the help of some kind people and were able to return back to their own country. However, in the process, they encountered malicious rip-offs and pickpockets, facing extremely difficult situations. Their cash was almost completely gone. I was truly relieved that I had stopped Ellen's credit card. I left a divorce paper with my name on it, the wedding ring, and also the contact information of a lawyer at the house where I lived with Daniel. As soon as I returned back to the country, I started looking for a lawyer specializing in divorce. I was determined to fight with all my heart. I was preparing for the upcoming battle, but Daniel surprisingly quickly signed the divorce papers and submitted them. He had lost a significant amount of money in the incident in France. He had also lost his job and couldn't afford to hire a lawyer. Apparently, he had complained to Ellen about not being able to take time off for the trip to France, just like me. However, he was swayed by his mother's persuasion.
You can always look for a job again. Plus, Natalie is always with you, so you can make a living even if you don't work. It's okay to quit your job. What matters is spending time with your family. You should go on a family trip.
Regarding that, all I can say is that Daniel's way of thinking was just too simple. However, in light of this situation, I was finally free from the bondage and had gained my freedom. Daniel lost almost all of his assets through alimony and property division, and now I can picture him working hard. On the other hand, Ellen used to rely on me for various administrative procedures, so she is now in a state where she does not know what to do. I hear that she is facing a tough time with overdue payments and unpaid taxes. No matter how difficult a situation they fall into, it is no longer my problem. As for how far they will fall, all I can do is calmly observe.